Today I want to talk about something that I have heard a lot, and it is the phrase, done is better than perfect. But is it really? And I think that people who have been brought up in fields where perfect is the standard, like classical music, it is really hard to let go of that perfectionism. Today I want to talk about how to let go of it, why it's important to let go of it, and how to show up as a full human. I'm going to talk about the classical music industry, why we teach perfectionism, because I do think it's taught from a very young age, and why people are driven to quit because of it. And I want to talk about the scarcity that is rampant in the classical music industry and how it trickles down into teaching at every single level. My name is Chelsea. I am a classical flutist and a mindset coach for musicians. I talk about perfectionism, imposter syndrome, performance anxiety, all of the above. So if you're interested in that and maybe some flute educational content, stick around. So, done is better than perfect. I almost didn't make this video today because I did not fully dry my hair. To me, that seems like such a complete no-no, but we're gonna do it. It takes too long, there's too much of it, so this is what we're going with today. I also cannot find my memory card for my normal camera, so I'm using my phone. These are two things that usually would derail me, but I am committed to getting things done rather than having them be perfect, so here we are. And I'm not gonna say excuse the hair, because why should I excuse my hair when people with other haircuts wouldn't have to do anything to their hair and they could still say things and people would take them seriously? So, as an act of rebellion, I'm not sorry. Let's talk about done is better than perfect. This is a really good example. Is this perfect? No. Is this later than I wanted to be filming? Yeah. Do I have the perfect words to say? Did I plan every single one of them out? Did I practice it? No, I didn't. And I still think that you'll probably get value from this video. Now, if you're a classical musician, or even if you're not, but you've been trained in an industry where perfection is the standard, it can be very hard to let go of this. Now, I want to go through some reasons why I think classical music has bred perfectionism into its education. The first one being, a lot of times, we are really focused on the craft and executing, not creating or playing, but executing the notes on the page. So when we execute the notes on the page, done is better than perfect doesn't really fly, right? Getting things done at all costs isn't really the point of playing and exploring. If we were just playing and exploring, we could take our time, we wouldn't feel rushed, we wouldn't feel behind. But the piece that really injects itself into the culture is scarcity. There aren't jobs. Everything's super competitive. There's like 6 flute auditions a year, like in America. In the whole world, there's probably 15, maybe, and not all of them pay a full-time wage. So if we're thinking about that, yeah, I think that scarcity being bred into the industry is something to look at and to really decide intentionally whether we want to keep perpetuating that. I think there's a way to talk to students or approach students that isn't just the training that you got. Now, here I'm talking to all of my lovely music teachers. I never approach the instrument the same way with a student, because I want to know how flute fits into their life. I'm not going to train someone who is an adult, for example, who is just playing for fun. I'm not going to treat them the same way that I would treat a student who is auditioning for orchestras or graduate schools. Those goals are very different, and I think that they are training for different things. They are both still playing the flute, but I don't think they're training for the same thing, and I'm not going to teach them the same way. Though I think it is our job as teachers to tell our students what we know about the industry, I don't necessarily think we need to say, you have to do this or else you won't make it. That doesn't give a lot of wiggle room. Perfection itself is one thing. We can't go above it, we can't go below it, we have to hit it. What is it? It's made up. But when we add scarcity, so we're afraid to do things wrong because, first of all, we've dedicated our whole life to this one thing. Our livelihood depends on how well we play our instrument. Then we compound that with how we teach, which is, okay, my teacher is being paid to give me feedback, but we're not really breeding creativity a whole lot. We're trying to be as efficient as we can be within an hour or however long. And so we're not playing for fun in our lessons, so we're not having that demonstrated to us. We're not playing for the joy of playing. I think a lot of times, since we don't necessarily ask even a 7th grader, what is their goal with flute? I ask my middle school kids that all the time. What do you want to get better at? What do you see other people being able to do that you want to do, and why do you want to do it? Do you like band? Do you want to be there? If a student doesn't want to be there and you're pushing them super hard, I don't know if that's good for either of you. It's a lot of energy on your end, and on their end, they might not want to learn in that way. I think there's a way to still learn and still develop musical skills without pushing a certain agenda of the classical musician or the professional classical musician. The hard part about this is we aren't taught to teach. If you have a private music teacher, they likely have not gone through a music education course. They likely have a performance degree, and they probably have not been trained as a teacher. That's the thing they learn on the job. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've done that. I have taken one course on private music teaching in school, and I did 10 years of music school. I have a doctorate in flute performance, and hardly anywhere. I had some teachers mentor me, and I had some pedagogy classes, but on private music teaching in general, as a whole philosophy, I haven't seen it in a lot of places being offered to students. So a lot of times we just teach what we know and how we were taught. We just follow what has been set as an example to us. And that's what we're creating more of. My mission is to change the course of this, of classical music. I think we can think differently. I think we can teach differently. I don't think we need to keep employing the same ways of teaching music as we always have. Of course, there are certain things that we can help students improve, but I always think, like, why would someone improve their sound? Why? If just playing for fun, would they want to perfect their tone? Why would they want to get better at technique? What do they want to do? And I teach a lot of adults and really serious hobbyists, and they want to be the best flutist they can be for themselves, for their personal growth, for a way to express their voice. And I think there is so much more concentration on craft than there is on creativity. And I think it should be a balance. Perfectionism is telling young musicians that they can't represent themselves in a way that's imperfect. By telling them they have to get notes, rhythms, intonation, sound, everything perfect to be considered. Before that they can actually put original thought and opinion into something. Which is why there are so many musicians that are so scared to make mistakes, to mess up, and they are so afraid of putting their own interpretation out there because they're just afraid that they're going to be wrong. And being wrong means being discounted. And that whole thing they've worked their whole life for will have been for nothing. I say that in air quotes because it's not actually true, but that's what we think sometimes. It feels so high stakes. We are playing an instrument, making sound waves on a stage. This is not life or death. It's not. I used to think it was, to be honest. I used to think, oh my gosh, I don't have any other skills. I can't do anything else. How am I going to make it here? And I used to think that it was the most high pressure thing that ever existed because we're taught that our playing is a representation of us. And it can be our voice, and in a lot of ways, it can be representative of us and how we play that instrument. But that doesn't mean anything, actually. It's what you make it mean. So just for an example, we're taught when we go to music school that we should prepare for every rehearsal because the people we're sitting next to in music school are going to be around us our entire careers. So if we are unprepared for something, and I don't know, sometimes we're human, right? We forget to practice something. Then the person sitting next to us is going to remember that, and then they are going to remember that for the next 10 years as we are trying to build our careers. and you don't want to represent yourself poorly, so you have to show up always on. And kind of pressure, this lack of acceptance in being human and making mistakes, this builds over time. This builds and perpetuates. And I don't think it's conscious, but once someone thrives in that setting, they don't generally take a different approach with their students. That worked for them, so it's got to work for everybody else. And I'm not really into that. I think that there are as many ways to show up with your instrument as there are people who play instruments. And the beauty isn't how perfectly you can do it. It is you and that instrument coming together in that moment. That's just a shift in philosophy for me. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought the same way. I was deep into orchestra auditions, perfectionism, and just brutally talking to myself until I did what I had to do. But the entire time, it never felt good or grounded. It never felt like actually putting my all into it because I was just so scared to mess up. Done doesn't really exist in the music world, in your relationship with your instrument. So done is better than perfect. What does that mean when it comes to your performance? Well, it might mean that you, no matter what, show up knowing that the beauty of what you're doing right now doesn't come from your instrument. It comes from you as a human. It comes from where you are, meeting the repertoire you're playing, meeting the instrument you have, meeting the space you have. Maybe it's a recording. It reminds me of a student that I had once when I taught at a university, and they had asked me if they could postpone their recital for a week. And I was like, a week? Is that going to give you enough time to know it more? They were like, well, I haven't mastered all of the concepts yet. Like, to play the flute in general, I haven't mastered the flute yet. It almost sounded like that's what they were saying. And I thought, no, we can't postpone it a week, because a week isn't enough time either. You have got to play with what you have in that moment. And there may be times when your ears hear things that are better, that you want to sound like. You can recognize the discrepancy between where you are and where you want to be. But done is better than perfect is with the ability you have and resources you have, performing your best anyway, and accepting that as done, and better yet, as inherently perfect no matter what. You can choose whether to see something as perfect or not. Perfect is an opinion, and we don't talk about it that way in classical music very much. I personally do not use the word perfect, and it's so funny if someone gives me feedback and they say, Chelsea, that was perfect. I get like happy chemicals in my brain, literally. It's disgusting, actually. I don't like it. I don't actually want that to be the case. But I do, because I've been trained that way. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice and kind of rob ourselves from a lot of self-love and an opportunity to have compassion for ourselves and understanding and put ourselves out there fully if we think that everything has to be perfect or we shouldn't put it out then. And this is completely counter to everything we're taught in music school. We are taught that we're only as good as our last performance. These are actually things people have said. There's only room at the top. Everything you play is representative of yourself professionally. I mean, the list goes on. There's no wiggle room at all, and it is suffocating after a while. So if you feel like you're suffocating, know that the world is bigger than classical music. The world is more expansive, thank goodness, than this bubble you find yourself in. I wrote a blog about classical music being like a toilet paper tube we're looking through. And like anything that comes up in front of it feels really big because this is all we can see. Take it down. Choose to maybe play a different genre. Hang out with people who aren't classical musicians. Hang out with musicians who aren't classical musicians. Go play your instrument, and you could play Probably Mary Had a Little Lamb for people and they would be like, wow. The level we hold ourselves to is crazy. And I think there's so many more parts to what I want to say about this, but the scarcity of it's never going to be enough and I have to be perfect that is actually what will kill creativity every time. And are we in this industry to be perfect, or are we in it to be creative? Are we in it to express something and make a difference? Or are we in it for perfection? And I would really question, for every teacher, I do it all the time, what you want your students' experience to be like with music. Because I think we can do better. Let me know in the comments if this resonated with you at all, and I will see you next time.